Psych Sessions podcast is brought to you by STP, the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. Hey, this episode features Tom Pusateri, and I just want to thank Tom for this relationship that we've had this year. Every single bi-weekly episode of the Psych Sessions podcast, and this commercial begins by Tom as the Executive Director of STP, finding information that he thinks would be most valuable for teachers of psychology to know, feeding me that information, and then I get to provide it to you all. So thanks, Tom, for the collaboration this year, and I'm so glad that we get to hear from you today. Click on the awards and grants link on teachpsych.org for a list of upcoming deadlines for STP's awards and grants, including the Excellence in Teaching Awards, Civic Engagement Award, Mentorship Award, and Instructional Resource Grants. Also, proposals for the virtual STP Division 2 program at APA 2021 are due January 12th, 2021. Please visit convention.apa.org/proposals. And finally, APA members of STP apply to become a Division 2 Fellow by December 31st. Visit teachpsych.org and click the STP Fellows link under the Membership tab. Eric and I want to remind you that STP is more than worth the $25 per year that you will spend in your membership dues. Please join STP. If you're not already a member, why not? And if you know someone who's not a member, but they should be, please forward the website teachpsych.org to them with an invitation to join the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. Hey, Sue Franz.
Hey, Garth.
Let's do this. Why don't you and I do a season of episodes where we talk about teaching?
Now, Garth, when we have these conversations, would it be okay if I had a beer while we talked?
I would assume that unless people are out there driving, that they are also having a beer with you or a beverage of choice if they don't drink alcohol. That'd be fine. For those who do, definitely encouraged.
I can see some people choosing a nice herbal tea.
We're going to get this thing out before the end of 2020 because we know that people need something fun and entertaining to listen to, and I hope that we can not only offer some good teacher talk, but maybe have some fun doing it at the same time.
Well, you and I are going to have fun. Now, whether anybody enjoys listening to us have fun, I can't help you with.
Well, that's the truth, Sue. You and I have had a lot of fun over the years talking about teaching. It's a passion of ours, and to tell you the truth, I don't like to think about teaching just in my own little bubble. I really love the teaching community. I think you do too. You value that. It's one of the things that I've learned from you. And so what do you say we go on this journey together?
I think that's a fantastic idea, Garth.
Join us for Season 1 of Psych Sessions, Garth and Sue Talk, textbooks, exams, student workload, integrative themes, and so much more. It is a bingeable listening experience, and it will premiere on Thanksgiving Day, Thursday, November 26th. So grab a drink and come join the conversation. Hello and welcome to Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Garth Neufeld, along with Eric Landrum, your podcast hosts. As the name implies, we center on conversations about teaching, but we often veer into other interesting topics, which is the and stuff. This is episode 106, where Eric had the opportunity to interview Tom Pusateri, professor of psychology emeritus at Kennesaw State University in Kennesaw, Georgia, and Executive Director of the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. But before we get to that, a quick plug for Psych Sessions programming. If you haven't heard, it's been a big year. First, we became a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're building a website. Eventually, we're going to have an app. Please check out Alternative Programming, Ask Psych Sessions with Marianne Lloyd, Sodal Psych Sessions with Anna Robb, and a new series, Season 1 of Garth and Sue Talk, where we talk about all kinds of different topics in teaching. If you want to learn more about this or other Psych Sessions programming, please join our opt-in email list. If you'd like to get on our email list, please go to, now this is a little tricky, but we'll try this. Everything is lowercase except the P in psych and the S in sessions, bit.ly/psych sessions_email. That's bit.ly/psych sessions_email. Remember that P and S are capitalized. It's case sensitive. Now, before you hear the interview with Tom Pusateri, please allow me to share some listening tips and some of my favorite moments. This is a really great insight to the inner workings of STP. I don't think there is anyone who knows more about STP than whoever the current executive director is. And Tom has been the current executive director in his second stint for multiple years. So he did a stint early before Ted Bosak did about 10 years as executive director, and now he is back at it. And he has so much institutional knowledge and history of STP. He knows so much. When I hear him talking about STP, I'm thinking, oh, this guy sees the big picture. And I can't imagine actually how frustrating it would be for him to see the big picture and then to have all of these moving pieces of new people coming in. And that's not him talking, that's me talking. But I understand what he says when what you, and he didn't say this, but what you know, you can't unknow some things. There are some things about STP that the executive director would know, probably could foresee people making certain mistakes that he maybe lets play out because he doesn't want to come across as controlling, which he talks about. I've also found it really fascinating to hear that Tom really never saw himself as coming up toward the presidency of STP to do 1 year there. He didn't feel like it was his skill set. What they discover is that perhaps maybe it is less about skill set, maybe more about desire to do that kind of work. When Tom had run and not won the presidency, he felt a sense of relief. For me, often that's the right way forward. It's confirmation. So they have a really interesting discussion about that early on in this conversation. They talk about the difference between what the president does in STP and what the executive director does, those two roles. And one of the big ones is that the president's term is a year. And in fact, the rest of the executive committee has brief term limits compared to the executive director. And so I think that in my conversations with people who are on the executive committee at STP, they really rely on that person. And I think I'm one of the 50 people he talks about in positions of leadership at STP. And I've got to say that I rely on Tom a lot in my position as director of regional conference programming. And so his reach is very wide. He carries a lot of information and know-how. And I love that he's a systems person, that he's trying to build systems that are going to support and sustain the society for the near future and long term as well. So I think he understands how valuable he is to STP and how valuable that position is. But just in case he doesn't, hey, all of you out there who, if Tom has ever helped you out, tell him how much you appreciate him from his STP community. They get into Tom's backstory. They didn't talk about this, but Tom mentioned that his dad was an accountant. His brother started in math, went into management, and I wonder in that family whether it's genes or environment. how those things kind of shaped Tom to be so successful in these more administrative positions, where organization is a skill that you, and management is a skill that you have to have. But he talks about the fact that he always wanted to be a teacher of psychology, and that became challenging at some points in his education, especially at institutions where research was really valued. We talk a lot on psych sessions about imposter syndrome, comparison, which I think in this day and age is really compounded by social media, but maybe has always been there. And Tom and Eric talk about self-esteem, especially as a new faculty member and watching other colleagues do some really amazing things and wondering, am I underperforming compared to them? And Tom has a pretty good knowledge of some social comparison theory that they discuss, and I found that really interesting. They talk about the assessment cyber guide that came out of the St. Mary's work at JMU and eventually evolved into the SNAP project assessment through the APA. So the last thing I want to talk about, because I am fascinated by it, I heard an episode, I believe it was with Marianne Lloyd on Ask Psych Sessions, about specific or contract grading or specifications grading. And Tom and Eric talk about specifications grading. And this is my favorite part of the interview. It was the last 5 minutes of the interview. And I really just loved hearing two veterans talk about the wisdom of maybe straying away from conventional grading and how it challenges you to be a better teacher and also creates more efficient systems that probably serve students better. Tom, we are so appreciative of you here at Psych Sessions. I'm glad we finally were able to get you on the podcast, and thank you for your time and all your service to the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. Without further delay, I hope you enjoy listening to Tom Pusateri with Eric Landrum.
I am so pleased to be here with another episode of Psych Sessions, and my very special guest is Tom Pusateri. Hi, Tom.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. And how are you?
Doing well.
I have known Tom, it's got to be at least 25 years, don't you think?
Probably when I started as membership chair in the late 90s.
Late 90s or maybe before that. When did you get to Loras College?
I got there in 1984.
Wow, in 84. Okay, so I got to Platteville in 89.
Okay.
So it might have been early 90s. And when did you become, and I'll do this more systematically, but in the first gig in round one of Executive Director, what was the first year that started?
That started in 2000. I actually started with STP, though, in 1995. I was the membership chair from 1995 to 98.
Okay. But 1984 at Loras College. So I should stop jumping around. So currently, Tom, you serve as Executive Director for the Society for Teaching of Psychology. Did I get everything correct there?
Yes, correct.
All right. And you are in round 2 or 2.0 of that service.
Yeah, I was the original. I was the first Executive Director from 2000 to 2007. And then when I took the position at Kennesaw State University's Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, the position was just too burdensome for me to continue as the executive director. And that's when Ted Bozak took over from 2007 until 2017. And then I started back in January 2018, around the time I was about to retire.
And so, Tom, are you officially connected with Kennesaw anymore, or have you retired? Are you on a bridge retirement program? What's that status, if I may ask?
I fell into the river when I retired. I'm emeritus, but
Okay.
I do not teach. The position of executive director is enough to keep me happy. It
Oh, yeah, I think emeritus, at least from what I've seen from afar, between you and Ted, uh, is a full-time job, or you've turned it into a full-time job. Quite honestly, when you did it from 2000 to 2007, I don't know how you did it alongside of a full-time job.
I was just sort of lucky that Loras College gave me some time off. And my colleagues, when I went down to Florida Atlantic University as the assessment director, my boss was extremely happy that I was doing national service. So they were very responsive to the time I took. It was when I went to Kennesaw and the job got, it was very time consuming at Kennesaw, that it just made it difficult. So I needed to step down.
I'm trying to turn over a bit of a new leaf, so I'm just going to try to blip over the "I was just lucky," because I think you worked incredibly hard to do two jobs at the same time. So
Yeah, but I also have to say that I buy into Bandura's theory of human agency, and fortuity is a very essential component. So much of what happens that makes us successful is that we just happen to be at the right place at the right time with the right abilities.
yes, yeah, but the right place at the right time with the right abilities. That the third part of that, the first two things can't be triggered without the third part of that.
Probably. I mean, I'm guessing that some students might disagree if they get inspired by someone to increase their talents. They might have some native ability, but they need that encouragement to flourish.
See, I was just going to blip over that. I was just going to let the record reflect. I was just going to go right smack over that.
Well, Eric, I've got to press you on your thinking.
Well, and plus, first off, that is the beauty of a podcast, and that's the beauty of talking to your friends on a podcast, that you get to have these conversations. So you are doing the gig in version 2.0 now. Yeah, it looks from afar like a full-time job, and I got to see a little bit of the inside baseball part of it through Ted when I served as STP president, and he was just invaluable as executive director during my year. And so I know that every STP president just incredibly values that executive director role, because I know you help each and every president immensely during their year.
It's an important position. I'm very happy that we made the decision to initiate that position in 2000, and it has grown in complexity over the years. So there are a lot of challenges.
Well, just what I can remember from, gosh, what would it be? 7 years ago, Ted working with, and now you working with APA and management services and taking care of dues and interacting with membership through APS and NITOP and all the organizations that STP interacts with, the structure of president and vice presidents and a secretary and a treasurer. They're, when you have full-time faculty members serving in those roles, they normally wouldn't have had the bandwidth to, take care of the details of working with APA accounting services in that office and all the other interactions. I mean, it really takes a person who can take a deep dive and become a specialist in interacting with those other agencies.
Yeah, it is. You're hitting the nail on the head. And what I'm trying to do in my role right now is try to help the faculty who are taking on these mostly volunteer roles, very little stipend, if any stipend. Usually it may be that they get to travel to a conference, but most of them are doing it in complete voluntary a voluntary position. And then I'm trying to figure out, well, my biggest concern right now that I'm in my 60s, I've become more and more concerned about maintaining the history and legacy of STP and trying to encourage our leaders to think forward to the next person who will replace them. How do they get access to all of the resources that you developed if you maintain it on your institutional website or through your institutional email? We need to have that information readily available so they can transfer. So I've been working a lot on that to try. Basically, this year, I established Gmail accounts for all of our members,
Right.
our leaders. We have a Dropbox account for everyone that they can use instead of their institutional Dropbox. And it's, I don't want to mandate that people do this, but I think that it makes a lot of sense to try to help the organization maintain its archives and its history.
So, Tom, how did you get interested in this service aspect? I mean, so you've served 2 gigs as executive director. You served, I believe, if I remember, I might not get the title right, as associate director for CETL at Kennesaw State. You mentioned Florida Atlantic. I mean, so I'm assuming you weren't trained to do any of that in graduate school. I don't know if you have any business background or training as a faculty member. So can you talk a little bit about how did that come into your training or into your consciousness, really?
Just lucky, I guess, but no.
Oh God. Okay. You know how wait a second. So you know how we tell guests that they have full editorial control
Yes.
of podcasts and what we record, so do the editors, so do the hosts. We'll leave that in because that's damn funny.
Well, I will tell you that I view myself, and I think this is, I think I'm pretty self-aware of my talents, and I never saw myself as the top leader. I actually did run for president of STP twice, and I feared having that position because I was not certain that I had that talent. But I did know that I have the talent to provide resources to people. I see myself really being able to contribute to other people's successes. And so what happened, for example, when I was at Loras College, the person the chair at that time, Bruce Moore, was a industrial organizational. He taught the industrial organizational course, and I said, that's an important course for our majors, like you are emphasizing. So many of our majors go on to positions immediately after graduating, and they need some skills in industrial organizational psychology. And so I took the opportunity when Bruce left Loras to get trained down at the University of Iowa to teach the IO psychology course. And we developed a human resource management major at Loras College that we did jointly with the business department there. And that got me interested in issues of assessment because training and development is such an important part of IO. And then I decided, maybe I can contribute to Loras by becoming involved in the assessment processes. That was the time when I don't remember if it was called Higher Education Institute at the time, but the accreditation at Loras, we were coming up for that, and we needed to have some sort of assessment model. And so I took that on. That got me into Florida Atlantic University when I got discouraged at Loras. There were changes that were happening that did not make sense to me. And so I looked for a position, and the natural fits were either assessment or working as a faculty developer. And I did interview at a couple of places, but Florida Atlantic was a good match for me, so I went down there.
So I want to follow up on a couple of things that you said.
Okay.
So before Loras, or before that experience, you really kind of weren't interested in assessment at all, or just you knew it existed and you knew it was important, but you really didn't do it?
Well, this is again in the early or the mid.
Right.
And most people weren't talking about assessment. We just thought that we were doing a good job. And then I think a lot of the pressures, the institutional pressures to have an assessment plan, woke us up to say, we really do need to consider what we're doing. And that's what got me involved in the assessment at Loras College. And I made a couple of presentations at the teaching conferences on our assessment plan.
Sure. And can we, and we really don't have to go here if you don't want to, but I think your comment about running for STP president and your own disconnect is fascinating. And I think you're underselling yourself, Tom.
I'm not underselling myself. I know who I am.
Yeah, but if you think about the services and the support that you provide in the role that you serve as executive director, you don't think that same skill set would serve you well for a year as STP president?
I think that I would rather defer to others on that. And what I feel most comfortable doing, and I'll tell you, this is the biggest tension for me right now. I have so much knowledge of the workings of STP that I sometimes fear that I could become authoritarian on the way that I work with our colleagues. They don't deserve that. They deserve support. But sometimes they don't exactly know. They're just learning the role. And sometimes I'm hoping that I'm not doing this. But sometimes I fear that I might be urging people to do things that they may not be comfortable doing, like using the Gmail, using Dropbox, doing things in a certain way.
Right. No, I hear you loud and clear, but that kind of didn't answer my question.
I will try to deflect as much as I can.
But and I'm not asking you to run, but what I'm saying is that now, if you choose not to and you don't want to, that's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
But to say that you don't have the skill set, I'm going to gently disagree with you. And obviously, you can say I'm very self-aware, but I think if you have the skill set to serve, as I've seen you serve, but you say, "Oh, I don't have the skill set to be a successful STP president," I'm going to call you on that one, my friend.
Well, I mean, I know that a lot of other people who have felt a little bit apprehensive about taking on the responsibilities, but it was something that I felt the two times that I ran, I was very happy that I did not receive the votes.
Okay, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I mean, obviously, you get to feel however you want to feel. I'm not trying to talk you out of that.
Right.
I'm just saying, for you, there's a piece in there that I don't think if you're saying I don't think I could do it, or I don't have the skill set, or I don't think I could be successful at it, I don't know how much of a card player you are, but there's a card game called BS, and I would be calling BS on that. Now, if you don't want to do it, or if you feel uncomfortable doing it, that's a whole different thing.
Well, I will tell you, though, I also had this concern when Bill Hill retired from the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at Kennesaw State. I could have put myself up for that position, and I said no. I felt myself as a very good supporter for, as an associate director of the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. I could support faculty very well, but I did not think, and still do not think, that I would have ever been successful in the administrative role that Bill did, in interacting with the administration in a completely different way, and arguing for the budget and maintaining things. That's just not in my skill set. STP may be a little bit less troubling, in terms of me ever assuming that role. I don't foresee me ever assuming that role now that I'm retired, but I still don't think that I would have been as happy or successful. And the other thing, too, is when you're president, a lot of times what happens after you're past president and chair of our Elections and Appointments Committee, it's bye-bye. You're no longer involved in this organization. I've found strategies for keeping myself involved. I'm not even certain I would run for vice president.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, the structure of it is that you do fall off a cliff, and to some extent, I think that's by design. I mean, someone who has ascended to be able to serve, and normally, you've served as an officer. I mean, I served as secretary, I served as president, and then to some extent, you need to get out of the way and let other people take on roles, and people earlier in their career need to come up. I mean, the same people don't need to be, taking up space, as it were. And there are a couple of places where I think former presidents of STP can serve, and they're good at that service. Things like Council of Representatives and things like that, where you want someone a little bit more seasoned, typically, to serve.
And
all right,
yeah, we're much concerned about making sure that we expand the talent, and I think we've been very successful in terms of the number of positions that we have. We now have over 50 people on our leadership as chair, editors, directors, vice presidents, secretary, treasurer, etc. So it's a pretty, and then you add all the committee members and associate editors, associate directors. We're a large organization right now. But even that, we're concerned that we may not be reaching out to all of our audience. Recently, the executive committee, especially with the concerns about Black Lives Matter, revisited its issues and found, for example, we've only had 2 presidents of color in our 75-year history. And a very small percentage of the executive committee over time have been people of color. And so we're very much concerned about reaching out and making our organization a welcome organization for everyone. So the executive committee recently passed a statement on addressing systemic racism in STP.
I read that statement. It was very powerfully written. It was very articulate. It was backed. It was evidence informed. It was if you're a fan of higher education, if you're a fan of the teaching of psychology, I encourage anyone to go and read that. Absolutely.
And so I agree with you. I do agree with you that we do need to step away. I also see the value, though, of at least some continuity, and that's what I really like about the executive director position, that an individual serves as sort of a bridge from the past to the present and into the future.
Yeah, and I think we've got to, and I'm about to move away from this topic. I think we've got to encourage those folks to stretch that skill set and take that chance to step into those leadership roles. It might not always be president, but to take that chance. I remember being on the executive committee and saying about someone serving in some capacity, we've got to let them have a chance to sink or swim. It's okay if XYZ doesn't get done. You have to let them have a chance to succeed or fail. That's how they build a skill set. That's how they build leadership. And so we've got to encourage those young Tom Pusateris to run for office and to get in there and take those leadership roles.
Yeah. And I think what that means, too, is I can tell you how I got involved as a membership chair. I was very fortunate, I won't use the word lucky, to be involved, to be at MyStop, the Midwest Institute of Teaching Psychology that then added students to the title. And Wayne Whiten invited me for tapas. I've never had tapas before. And while we were eating, he pressed me and said, you could be a membership director. We need a membership chair. And we think you have the talent. And I sort of blew back and I said, Loras College is very busy. It makes me very busy. And I just don't know if I have the time and I'm not even certain I have the talent. And he just pressed me, and that's what started me on my road. So I do think that we do need the senior leadership to go out and recruit and get people involved, because that encounter with Wayne Whiten made a difference in my life.
And that also speaks to the story of conferences, which we now struggle to have in person. And I know that everyone is doing the pivot to online virtual conferencing, which is a decent stopgap, it's really the only option in town for now. So we do what we do. But, that face-to-face encounter with Wayne Whiten, as you just said, made a huge difference in your life. When I think, we could talk to 100 people in STP who are leaders off of that, leadership page you were mentioning a moment ago, and we could get their stories of who it was, whether it was Jane Hallinan or Bill Buskist or whoever it was who pressed them into service in STP, Ken Keith, Barney Bynes, who talked them into, hey, you should do this in STP.
Yeah, we do need to do that, and we just need to spread a wide net. I do hope that we can, at least during this pandemic time, simulate that with the upcoming virtual annual conference on teaching. Our early career psychologists are hosting a mentoring session. It's going to be similar to what they did at the Denver conference, but it will be all live. Online. And so that may be a way for the mentors to reach out to new early career faculty. I think that's already been booked, so no one can register for it now, but they offer that every year. And maybe we have to find other strategies to do that, even without the conference, to get people actively involved.
Well, STP's always been creative in that regard. I'm sure they will continue to be so. So Tom, I'm gonna pivot on us here, and can I ask you, where did you grow up?
Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, Pennsylvania. And do you have brothers and sisters?
3 brothers.
3 brothers. And where are you in the sequence?
I am, well, it depends on how you count.
Gotcha.
If you look at the old research, I am the 3rd born out of 4, but there's a 10-year gap between me and my youngest brother.
All right. So for 10 years, you were the baby of the family.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, a 4th one comes along. There's actually 8.5. So I am the 4th born, and there's 8.5 years between my sister, and then I come along last. And my mother was kind enough to call me a surprise and not an accident. And so so I don't know if the terminology was used in your family like that. So you were the 3rd of 4 boys.
Yeah.
Okay. And are you a first gen in your family?
No, you're talking about
college student. I'm sorry. Yeah, first generation college student.
My dad actually went. I don't know what degree he ended up with, but he became an accountant, and so he did go to college. And my both of my brothers, one got a master's, the other one. I can't remember what degree he got, but he started teaching mathematics in schools and then decided that wasn't for him and went into managing drugstore.
Okay. So and so the classic question I like to ask, and you probably know it's already coming, and I think based on what you've just said, I know the answer, was the question for you growing up, will you go to college or not? Or was the question, which college are you going to go to?
The question was, how do I become a teacher?
Interesting.
When I was a sophomore, I was in a class with a gentleman named Bob Bergman who taught history, and he sounded like Jimmy Stewart. But while I was listening to him every day, I said, "Huh, this sounds like a great job." I really was impressed by how he presented history. And I said, I think at some point I want to become a teacher. I didn't know what level of teaching I wanted. But then I said, okay, what do I want to teach when I grow up? And I just happened to be in our library when I was a senior, and I found a book on developmental psychology and thought, wow, this stuff sounds interesting. Maybe I'll apply to a college and major in psychology. And that's how I happened upon it. I was never, I was a little bit, although I was valedictorian of my high school, it was a Jesuit preparatory school. I did not want to go to a high-powered uh, uh, college or university. I didn't apply to Harvard or Yale or any other place like that. I liked the Jesuit tradition, and so I applied to Lemoyne College and got accepted there, and a small liberal arts college. And then I met Bill Holmes, who was the chair of the department, and he taught social psychology. I thought he was just amazing. The way he organized his lectures and presented the information, and I said, social psychology is what I want to major in.
So was Vinnie Heverin there also?
No, that was prior to Vinnie's time.
Okay.
But Bill Holmes, I think he's still at. I'm not certain whether he's still there or not.
So your initial interest, based on a book in the high school library, was developmental.
Yep.
And you applied to a bunch of Catholic schools?
I applied to Holy Cross, to Lemoyne. I don't remember the other institutions I applied to, but Lemoyne was just a safe. I felt it safe because it was only 2 hours away from Scranton in Syracuse, New York. That
Gotcha.
allowed me to travel relatively easily. I didn't feel like it was high pressured. Although I probably could have succeeded at some of those higher pressure institutions, I just didn't feel like I wanted to do that.
Could you take the train, or did you have a car?
No, at that time it was called a milk run. It's a 2 hour drive by car and about 6 hours by bus. And so,
Okay.
but I did get a car. My dad worked as an accountant in a Dodge dealership, and he was able to get me a beater up car. And so I would
Sure.
drive that. And we couldn't. I don't think you could drive a car as a freshman or a first year student in Lemoyne. And so when I was a sophomore is when I started using the car.
So after hearing that amazing social psychologist teach, social psychology was your gig.
Yeah. And then that's where I applied. I asked him for advice, and he suggested the top places to get a degree in social psychology. And that's when I applied to Ohio State, the Ohio State University. And I got accepted there because this is the fun thing. I got accepted there because Tom Ostrom was very much supportive of students from smaller liberal arts colleges.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he advocated for me to gain the position.
All right. So, and did you put all your eggs in one basket and only apply to Ohio State?
No, Michigan State, University of Michigan, a couple of other places. I did get accepted to a few, but I chose Ohio State for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it's a great university. But it was also an hour and a half away from Kings Island, an amusement park where they had just built the Beast roller coaster.
Okay, so I've known you. Again, we can't really figure it out. 20, 25 years at least. Let's take an aside and allow you to tell the listeners why that tidbit is important to this story.
Because I became a roller coaster enthusiast. I was scared of the damn things when I was a child. And then my friends took me in high school. We went to Hershey Park, and they forced me on the Comet, I think is the name of the roller coaster. And I just loved it. And I said, why did I avoid this? And that got me involved in just wanting to ride all these roller coasters. And so when I saw the information about this huge roller coaster being built in southern Ohio, I said, Ohio State's close. So let me apply there. And when they accepted me, and Michigan State accepted me as well, and I just said, I think both these are great institutions. Ohio State just happens to be closer to a amusement park that I want to go to.
So Tom, I want to be clear about this, and I want the record to be clear about this.
Hey,
you based your graduate school application strategy and where you decided to apply to grad schools based on their proximity to theme parks that had awesome roller coasters?
No. I did it by the information that Bill Holmes provided me about what the best institutions were. And so I did apply to those best institutions. But when I made my final decision, the tipping point was, how close am I to a great
Okay.
That's a different thing. Okay, you see, I knew that all these places were wonderful. That I would get a good education,
Right.
But the roller coaster made the final decision.
Oh, okay. You know, when I talk to students, nowadays in the modern era, Oftentimes the tipping point is the financial aid package or how close they are to their parents or family support. I gotta say, in all my conversations with people in my entire life about graduate school decision making, that you're the one and only person who used that tipping point as roller coaster proximity.
Well, I should mention too, though, that I did get packages at.
Oh, of course.
So those were, they were equivalent. Everything else was equivalent, and I decided on Ohio State, and it was a wonderful place to be. I got to work with Bib Latané. He left after I got my master's, and so I started working with Tom Ostrom, the professor who advocated for me to be accepted to Ohio State, and got my PhD.
No, I'm sorry. Did you say Iowa State or Ohio State?
The Ohio State. Did I say Iowa State? I did not mean that if I said that.
I thought you did, but I just want to be clear. Ohio State.
The Ohio State University.
Okay, gotcha. Ohio State. All right. Yeah.
So I got my colleagues were Anthony Pratkanis, Steve Breckler, Patricia Devine, Sharon Shavit. All of these people made really big contributions in their time to social psychology. And when I decided, this is, I think, what Tom Ostrom, one of the reasons that Tom Ostrom said that he wanted me to be accepted is because in my letter of application, I said my goal was to become a teacher of psychology at a small liberal arts college. That's not exactly what Ohio State wants. They want high-powered researchers.
Right.
And Tom said, no, we also need people who teach in small liberal arts colleges. And so he advocated for me, even though others, I think, on the selection committee were concerned about me wanting only having that low bar in their.
Well, in their minds, the low bar. But to your credit, you told them what you wanted to do as you're going in. It's not like you said, I want to be a high-powered researcher, and then when you got there, you did a bait and switch.
Right. But I do think, it hits your self-esteem when you leave. When I went to Loras College and then I saw my colleagues getting these, just amazing articles published, gaining awards, gaining recognition. Steve Breckler went on to be the science directorate, the chief officer at APA.
Right. Yeah. Chief science officer. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And Pratkanis and Devine and Shavit all made names for themselves in some incredibly wonderful research. And here I am in Dubuque, Iowa, saying, I love what I do, but could I have done better?
Yeah, but okay. Oh, Tom. But the thing is, Steve Breckler didn't achieve that 3 years out of grad school. So you're mixing a bit of apples and oranges there. He did that 25 years out.
It was at the time that I was at Loras that these my colleagues were making major things. And so what happened basically, I started gaining better self-esteem when I started to attend teaching conferences.
Yeah.
And I saw people that were like me, and they were doing good things.
Absolutely. You found your pond, and you realized I can be a big fish in this pond.
I could be a contributor. I could be.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Is there a way to electronically, with love, strangle a person gently but with love? you don't have to be an STP president to be a big contributor.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I know. So why can't I convince you of this? Why can't you see yourself as the Stephen Breckler of STP?
I think that I now have a good reputation. I'm much happier now. I don't have the self-esteem problems I had when I was at Loras College. I know that I'm making a contribution. But the contribution that I'm making is exactly what I want it to be.
If you don't want to talk about this, we don't have to. But I think it could be, and I can talk about my own self-esteem issues as an assistant professor as well. But I think it might be useful as you and I, as two older, seasoned faculty members, it could be instructive to newer assistant professors to talk about that. I mean, what were those feelings like, and how did you deal with them then? And if you were giving advice to your younger self, what would you tell your younger self now?
Oh wow. I I think I think I was concerned that I was starting to compare myself to people that you know these are individuals that I valued that were my contemporaries, and they made big names for themselves. And now the question is, am I underperforming what I should be doing? And I think that's where the self esteem started to come in. And so I had to start thinking through, well, what am I doing that makes a difference? And that's where I think the development of the human resource management major at Loras College, getting involved in the assessment, starting to go to these conferences and making presentations. I got my first keynote offer to make a keynote address from Bill Hill to come down to CTOP because he saw some of the work that I did at the Mid America Conference. And so that's where, putting myself out there and doing the things that I thought were what I want to do made the difference.
Yeah, Tom, I think you nailed it. I can remember, I actually can remember being an assistant professor, and the thing that can be so toxic, I think, is that self-comparison against others, which is a natural human phenomenon that is really, I think, so toxic about social media these days. But you don't have to have social media to have toxic self-comparison with others, because you do look around, not only with your graduating class, but even other assistant professors in your own department. I can remember going to an MPA or an APA in the late 80s, early 90s, and partly coming home being exhilarated by seeing folks and hearing presentations and coming home with new teaching ideas. But in the other part of me being deflated as to, oh my God, I'm not working hard enough. Look at all the cool things everyone else is doing and I'm doing nothing. And not being fair to myself because I was doing a lot, but socially comparing and not thinking I wasn't doing enough. And it just took me time to realize I'm doing enough and what I'm doing is valuable to some and it's never going to be valued by others. And it just took time to figure out that I have to be the one that valued what I was doing. And if others valued it, great. If they didn't, that's okay too.
Yeah, and I think social comparison became such an important influence in my life because I just happened to be Bib Latinet's graduate student, and he got trained by Stanley Schachter, who got trained by Leon Fessinger. And so we were very heavy into social comparison theory, and a lot of on bystander apathy came from the tradition of social comparison. And so it was an important theme in my life. And in fact, I started my courses in social psychology when I was at Loras. I would not go in order in the book. I would start with the social comparison stuff because I thought that that was an important thing for students to know, that is a very common issue that we face, especially the impact it has on self-esteem and the motivation that it has to improve yourself. When you start making comparisons that are positive, that are saying, okay, here's where I am right now. Now, where do I need to be in a couple of years, and how do I get there? That's an important step.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, for you, because of your training and who you trained with, it's in your DNA and it's unavoidable. And I suppose for someone who's been trained in it, you might know how to leverage social comparison carefully, with a scalpel and be able to do it properly. But the rest of us novices out here, we might use a little bit of social comparison to motivate ourselves, but then you go, oh my God, look at Regan Gurung. He's had 14 publications this year, and I've only had 3. I'm a crappy researcher. I'm just going to go eat worms, when I should be proud that I had 3, that's where I think it goes wrong. When we beat up on ourselves when we shouldn't, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I bet it's amazing that I bet Regan has had some concerns about himself the way that we have. And, we're just constantly, I think you do have a point that we constantly do not take as much credit for ourselves as we can. But again, that's part of the social comparison issue and the situational factors. You look at attribution theory, people just know more about the variability of their behavior. And so they are very much sensitive to situational issues that affect their behavior. Whereas you're looking at me and you're doing the fundamental attribution error and saying, well, this is a talented person. Look at what he's accomplished. When in fact, if you put yourself in their shoes, they see all the situational pressures that they have to face.
I think the confluence of these two things, in all seriousness, the confluence of these two things is why I tend to stop people when they attribute their abilities and their accomplishments to luck, because I want them to take credit for it. And yes, there's fortuity. Of course, there's chance. Of course, there's good timing. But I want them to take credit and own the agency of all the work that they've done. And I know it's become a running joke now, and I get that, and I need to shut up about it. But in all seriousness, that's, that social comparison, don't call it luck. Take a bow and take credit for it. And, I talked about it on episode 100 about how I really started to notice it with my female colleagues and with my female students. Yeah. And I didn't like that trend at all. So,
yeah, I agree.
So Tom, I've almost had you here an hour. We've talked about roller coasters. We've talked about Loras. We've talked about The Ohio State University. Where did the assessment cyber guide come from?
Okay, that was originally a offshoot of the PPP. Now, let me see if I can remember what P3 stands for.
I can help you if you need it.
Yeah, can you? Can I help?
Yeah, the Psychology Partnerships Project.
Thank you. I'm thinking of preparing future faculty, and I'm just my memory when I thought of that. And so basically that group, Jane Hallinan, Bill Hill, Maureen McCarthy, I don't remember all of the players, but they developed they were focused on assessment. That was the St. Mary's Conference, if I believe.
That's correct. I want to say 1999 at James Madison University.
Yeah, and they developed the first best practices conference that Bill Hill hosted through Kennesaw State University. And that merged into the annual conference on teaching over time. They also developed an assessment cyber guide, volume 1, and then they decided that they needed to update that. And so I volunteered to help with it. And you know how busy lives are. The others who were instrumental weren't working on it as much as I could. And again, my talents are figuring out where the resources are, trying to direct people to information that they may not know. And so I pulled all this stuff together. So I saw the assessment cyber guide and I said, boy, this is missing some of the national conversation. So let me add, at the time the spellings report was out, the assessment movement was very strong. I had come from Florida Atlantic University. And so I started to work on elaborating on the assessment cyber guide so that it provided a stronger historical context. Now, I should mention, and Jane Callan is correct about this, what ended up happening was the assessment cyber guide became a monster. The second volume of it, it was probably too dense for most junior faculty or faculty who had very limited knowledge of assessment to struggle with. They really didn't know where to go into it. And so I do very much appreciate the move away from that cyber guide to the current assessment model that came out of Regan Goring's Wisconsin conference, the National Assessment Conference.
Yeah, SNAP.
SNAP, yes. And now we have the assessment model. I'm blanking on the name of it now.
It's okay. Project assessment through APA.
Yeah, project assessment, which is available on the APA website, that gives good examples. May I put a plug in for something else that you may not be ready to address, but I think it's so important for people to hear?
Go for it, buddy.
Okay. I wish that I had come across this when I was a junior faculty member, but it only happened to me in my last 2 or 3 years of teaching at Kennesaw State. And that is the book Specifications Grading by Lyndon Nielsen. Now, it didn't exist when I was in 1980s, teaching in the 1980s. But
yeah.
My God, as soon as I read that book and thought, I'm not teaching right, I'm not actually helping my students. It's possible that A students are not doing what I wanted them to do to get the grade of A. And so I adopted specifications grading for the last couple of years in my teaching, and it made a world of difference. Students weren't grubbing for grades anymore. They knew exactly what I expected of them. And when I gave them very clear guidance as to, here's what you need to do to get a C. Here's what you need to do to get a B. And even C students are going to do everything that I expect A students to do, just less of it. It makes a world of difference.
Yeah. I've read the book Spec. Yeah, the Spec. She calls it spec grading sometimes, and I think I saw her the one and only Pod. I went to Pod conference. I saw her give a workshop, and it was awesome. I used spec grading in an honors course I taught 3 or 4 years ago, and it worked beautifully. If you have enough time to think about it and change your course, or to develop a course around spec grading, yeah, it's you described it exactly right. It's a stair-step approach. Here's what you do to get a C. It's a contract grading.
Contract, yeah. But
yeah, and it spells out exactly. Now, the thing is, you have to be able to almost objectively describe the criteria by which, so many errors or so many citations or so many this or so many that. So to the extent to which you can objectively define what you want, then you're exactly right. It takes out grade grubbing. It takes out arguments, and students can dial up how much effort do I want to put into this course.
And what happens too is when I look back at the work that I did before specs grading, the work that students did before specs grading, I was finding that A students were getting A's without meeting the criteria that I really expected them to meet. That they were not, doing the critical thinking that I wanted. And so when you add critical thinking as an important specification, you don't get credit for this assignment unless you demonstrate critical thinking. It made a world of difference.
Yeah, and Tom, what the cool thing is, though, that makes a faculty member think about, is this assignment achieving what I think it's achieving?
Yes.
And how can I document that? Am I sure? Which brings us all back to validity and reliability, and which means a faculty member has to have the time and the bandwidth to think about, is this assignment meaningful or is it busy work? Do I keep doing what I've always done? So for me, that's why it worked well designing an honors course from scratch. And I had a small enrollment, so, with the honors course. So I really had time to play with it. But I agree with you. The spec grading really was lovely and it worked really well. And of course, my honors students were highly motivated. So I had a really positive experience.
I'm going to press you on this, Eric. We really should be doing this in every single one of our classes. Get rid of percentages. They're just ridiculous, the way that we are grading students. What's the difference between a 79% and an 80%? One's a B, one's a C. What does that mean? And can I finagle the situation? So I really don't want to do this part of the assignment, but I can get by. I can get a reasonable grade if I do the things. I can end up with an 80 on this and not do any critical thinking, or demonstrate critical thinking. And that's what happens. If we really are concerned about developing the skills that we want in our students, we've got to make sure that they have those skills. And it would make assessment so much better if, here's the evidence. Every single one of my students had to do this.
Tom, I'm smiling from ear to ear because you're preaching to the choir. I mean, in the workplace, C work is not normally acceptable, nor, employers expect A's every day. So, we wouldn't, we give our students this sliding scale of acceptability, A, B, and C. You're right. A 79 versus an 80. And then we create this point system. We create this gamification, whether we mean to or not. Absolutely. I mean, if you have a rubric, and of course rubrics are a good idea, but if you have 3 rubrics for a paper grading and, APA format and style is one part and the messaging is another part and something else is the third part, and they fail one and get 2/3 of the other and they can get a B, that's not good. They failed one part.
No. Your rubric should be, you meet all my criteria or you redo the assignment.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, and you get to say that because you're retired, and you don't have to deal with the fallout of those students and those parents. What do you mean I have to redo the assignment? What do you mean I have to redo it until I pass? Well, that's of course what the workforce would expect, or you get fired, or you get demoted, or something like that. But yeah, that spec grading, or that, working until a criterion is met, would make a lot of sense to model the real world.
Yeah. And I hope that I did not take us off on a tangent that you didn't want to go to. But
I love this tangent.
if I were to revise my world, boy, would it have made a difference when I was at Florida Atlantic University as the assessment director. I could have helped faculty do this, and we could pass through accreditation with no problem. And the same thing at Kennesaw State. I did do some workshops on specs grading, and people are concerned. It sounds like a lot of work, and they're so used to the percentage, using percentages and points. But why? I'm also convinced that these days, memory is not the way to grade student work. Sitting down for an exam and remembering things, and filling out multiple choice, or writing a canned essay. Those are not the skills that our students are going to need. We need to figure out better strategies. And I'm hoping I'm preaching to the choir here. We need
absolutely, yes.
of assessment and these timed exams. When you have access to data on smartphones and computers at your fingertips, you don't need to memorize. You need to know how to get the information and use it correctly. Information literacy is a hell of a lot more important than memorization skills.
Well, I've said it over and over all over the country, and I have a slide that essentially goes, what is it? I know of no occupation in the United States where you're required to take multiple choice tests for a living.
Good point, Eric.